What do most Fortune 500 executives have in common? After more than 150 conversations with executives from companies like Disney, Amazon, Netflix, and Google, I've learned that sports is a common denominator. Some of our guests' athletic experiences earned them a place in their sports hall of fame, like Chick-fil-A chairman Dan Cathy. Some hung up their cleats after high school, like Delta Airlines CEO Ed Bastian, while others, like Condoleezza Rice, claim they weren't that great in their sport. But no matter their skill level, they have all told me that being a part of a team taught them leadership lessons that they still use today. In partnership with Chief Executive Magazine, I'm your host, Don Yeager, here to give you an all-access pass to genuine, authentic, fireside chat-like conversations with today's business icons so that you can create powerful change in your organization. This is Corporate Competitor Podcast. With me for today's episode is Commander Alex Armatas, known as boss of the U.S. Navy's Blue Angels Precision Flying Team, where soaring canopy to canopy at 500 miles per hour is all in a day's work. From high school athlete to leading one of the most elite teams in the world, Alex's journey is inspirational. His career includes more than 4,500 flight hours and numerous deployments, and today he's here to teach us how to build and maintain trust in our organizations. Visit corporatecompetitorpodcast.com/notes to access our downloadable PDF with my favorite quotes from today's episode and reflection questions so you can apply Alex's valuable lessons.
I will never refer to this as my squadron. I will never refer to it as my team. This is our squadron. This is our team. Those are our airplanes outside. These are our people that work together. People can pick up on those little nuanced words that you use that might indicate that you kind of view yourself as the ringleader as opposed to just part of the team. At the end of the day, I'm just part of this team. The job I have within the team is a job within the team, but it doesn't make me any better or any worse than anybody else, or more important or less important than anybody else.
Boss, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I am genuinely glad to be here. I appreciate it.
Well, for many of those business leaders who listen to this podcast, I know they're going to be riveted by learning from you about trust. Everybody talks about it, but you experience flying at 500 miles an hour, inches away from a teammate, takes trust to an entirely different level.
Mm-hmm.
I can't believe the Blue Angels can achieve all that you can achieve. It's just a 2-year window that you get a chance to lead this organization. And every year, basically half of the team is rotating out. There's so much movement there. When new members of the team come in, how do you build trust?
To your point, we have 17 officers from the Navy and Marine Corps on the team. About half of those turn over every year.
Wow.
For the rest of our team, our enlisted personnel, it's about a third. So every one of our enlisted personnel is here on 3-year orders. The officers are a mix of 2 and 3 years. This squadron is much, much smaller than a normal fleet squadron of the equivalent size. And there is an expectation here that you are individually very qualified to do your job without any oversight. And the only way to do that is to ensure that we all trust each other. There's no easy way to do that. And there's risk there. You have to be willing to accept some of that risk. When you say to yourself, I'm going to trust all 160 people in this command to do the right thing 24/7, every day they're in the squadron, there's some risk there. There's a chance that that's not going to work out, that somebody's going to make a mistake, or they're going to do something they shouldn't have done, or there's going to be some other issue that comes up. And that does happen. The key there is that folks need to trust each other, not only to do everything right the way they're supposed to, but when they make a mistake, that they're willing to take that feedback, that they're willing to fess up if they were on their own. That's part of the trust process. I trust everyone to do their job perfectly every time. I also trust them to provide their own feedback if they don't, and it's fine. I have no problem with honest mistakes. That's not a huge deal in my mind, as long as they learn from it and they do what needs to be done to not repeat that mistake again.
Yeah.
Every member of this team trusts every other member of this team to do their job, to do it well, and to do it without somebody looking over their shoulder. So when you've got that brand new team, that trust extends to them as well. So whether we want to or not, we spend a lot of time together.
Mm-hmm.
And that time together builds familiarity, which generally breeds trust. We have a process for that, and it starts with day one of winter training. So we train through the months of November and December here in Pensacola, and then we start our air show season in early March. Air show season runs 32 show sites from early March to early November, and then we start the whole process over again. When you spend this much time together, there's no questions about the kind of people you're with. There's no way to put on an act. You're going to be your genuine self because, frankly, it's too exhausting to try to put on an act for the 12 to 16 hours a day we spend together when we aren't sleeping. Building trust has a time component. It does in any situation. Trust is not bestowed on anyone. It has to be built over time. And there's some things that can help that process. But at the end of the day, time is required. That's what this team does. This team puts in the time from November through March. And it doesn't end in March. We continue through the show season to continue to build trust with each other, to continue to work things. And you see that in our Delta formation. We start our season out several feet out. This is a guess, but probably 5, 6, 7 feet, maybe even more than that.
While flying at 400 plus miles an hour.
Yeah, anywhere between about 200 miles an hour up to about 500. And as the season goes on, the jets get a little lower and the jets get a little closer together. And that's part of the process.
Right.
By the end of the season, and not every team gets there, but the goal is what we call Yankee set. And for anybody that's watched the documentary that just came out, Boss Kesselring talks about Yankee set, which is our closest formation. And that is nominally about 18 inches from canopy to wingtip.
18 inches.
Anybody listening to this, as you're sitting in a chair like I am now, put your hand over your head. If you were flying in that 2-jet or that 3-jet and the canopy wasn't in your way, you could grab the wingtip of the 1-jet. So that's about how close we get.
Does that give you a chill?
So it's somewhat lost on me at times when I'm really in the trenches working on it, but it is incredible to see from the outside. The first time you see the Diamond come around the corner on that Diamond 360, those airplanes are close. They're all moving as one big airplane. It's a sight to behold.
You don't get to see it, obviously, because you're in the moment. But one of the things that is so impressive that you do is your debrief. And in that debrief, you're watching video.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever gotten to the place where watching it, as you have in that debrief, where you go, dang, that was awesome?
It happens. It happens once or twice.
But most of the time, you're actually picking yourself apart.
We're absolutely picking ourselves apart. Our normal flight demonstration is about 44 to 45 minutes, start to finish. In that period of time, we're always chasing that perfect demo. In a 44, 45-minute demo, I'd say if we're lucky, we'll get about 10 seconds where we think something we did was perfect.
Wow.
We don't have time to pat each other on the back and talk about all the good things. We did enough things wrong that'll take up plenty of time on its own. So that's where we focus. We focus on improving on the stuff we did wrong and accepting that the stuff we did right, we're going to do right again. You get glimpses of perfection. That's about the closest we get. But that feeling is incredible. And we're always trying to make it a little more, try to get a little bit better every single time. That's all we can do.
So how could a business leader run a debrief?
You have to establish the ability to provide feedback to people without it being personal. Constructive criticism, negative feedback, whatever you want to call it. But you need to be able to do that in a setting where we all trust each other and we all know that it is for the good of the organization. It's never personal. For that reason, we pretty much always say that debrief feedback needs to be constructive, but it needs to be tactful. You can tell somebody something that's very true, but if your delivery is off or it's not nice, just for the sake of being not nice, it's going to fall on deaf ears. And there's a lot of folks who maybe have very strong personalities or maybe
you got a lot of A-dogs.
You do. And I think you'll see people kind of wear it as a badge of honor that they'll say, I don't care what people think, or I'll say anything to anyone as long as it's true. And I think that's a trap. I tell my kids this all the time. It doesn't matter if you're right if no one's listening. And I'm not saying you have to be the nicest, most likable person in the world, but it's a very common pitfall in our debriefs and certainly in debriefs in general, anywhere that kind of thing happens. There have been times I have done that. There have been times I'm certain every member of this team has done that. And once you establish that trust within the organization, once we establish that none of this is personal, that we're all working together for the same common goal, you can even debrief people on their debrief, and that can be part of that feedback loop. And that's what we do. We go through November, December, January, February, March. Once we spend that 5 months together and build ourselves up as a team that trusts each other, it enables us to provide that feedback and to continue to improve. Mm. If you don't do a good job of saying something the right way, then the value of the feedback is diminished by the fact no one wants to hear from it because they're upset about how it was delivered.
You debrief on your debrief. I like that. You know, we had Keith Hoskins, who you probably know as an angel and one of our early guests on this podcast. And he talked about debriefs, that there were times when you would be 30 minutes into a debrief and realized you hadn't even yet covered the walk to the jet because you were busy debriefing whether we were in lockstep or whether we were doing the right thing. And the precision of the debrief really made a difference as well. Everything you do to be best.
That's right. We are unwilling to accept that any detail is too small. Every detail matters.
Does that get exhausting?
Oh, yeah, it does. There's a lot of details and it takes a lot of work to hit every little thing. However, everybody here buys into that. Everybody here understands that's what we're doing here. And we're trying to fly a perfect flight demonstration every time we go out there. And perfect means perfect. The word carries a meaning that we care about, and every single little bit matters.
I love it. So you loathe micromanaging.
Yes.
It's the single worst thing leaders can do. How do you break that habit?
That's a great question. It's tough. It's not a habit I've necessarily been in, but it's a constant battle to not micromanage. As I've gotten more senior and more experienced and more knowledgeable in my career, it is easier to accidentally fall into that. If somebody comes to me with an issue, it's probably an issue I've seen before. And the challenge for me is to remind myself that just because I've seen it before, just because it's something I've handled before, doesn't mean that this person that's talking to me wants to hear my story about it. That's kind of the double-edged sword of experience. It can be very easy to handle problems just because you've done it before, but you're taking something away from people that haven't seen that before and not giving them the opportunity to build their own experience base. Part of our job is not just doing the job we're assigned to do. It's setting this command up. It's setting this organization up to continue doing this job. There's no expiration date. There's no plan to close down the United States Navy. We need to continue to set this organization up to succeed weeks, months, years, decades, hopefully centuries down the road.
You know, you sit in your office. Over your shoulder, I can see pictures of all of those who have held that position before you.
Well,
you are giving everything to this organization for the time that you're there. 24 months, you're all in every day.
Absolutely.
But you look up there and you know that there's an expiration date on you, like a carton of milk. Is there a sense like, man, I got to try to squeeze as much in as possible? Are you worried about how it's going to feel the last day? I mean, do you ever get a chance to stop and think about those things, or is every day just such a blur that you can't?
It's a little bit of both. It's bittersweet to think about leaving for sure.
Especially now you're in the second year.
Yeah. In my second year leaving here in November. And when it's over, it's over. You don't get to run it back typically. I try to remind myself to smell the roses, as we say, once in a while, and try to enjoy a little bit of the experience. But at the same time, I have a job to do, and I'm going to do that job as well as I possibly can right up until the end. Not only because I enjoy doing that and I want this organization to do as well as it possibly can, but I owe my replacement the best possible organization I can hand over. It's very easy to fall into a sense of competition with somebody who's coming in, who's doing the same job you did. But I hope my replacement is better than I am. And I hope his replacement is better than he is or she is. And I hope that continues in perpetuity, because that's the only way we get better. If the person that replaces me or the person that replaces him does a worse job, and I say worse job, that's obviously very difficult to define, but it hurts the organization. The only way to keep moving forward is to keep making it better. So my goal is to make this place better than the way I found it. I am certain that the person I replaced had the same mindset, and I hope that the person that replaces me has the same mindset, and we just keep making it a little bit better.
So many of us who run organizations or maybe even founded companies, there's an expiration date on all of us.
Right. The time scale is different, but the result is not.
Right. But there's that part of you that goes, gosh, I want to be as mature as you're being right now, but I may not be when the day comes for me to pass this thing on. Where does that maturity come from?
My very first squadron, I was a junior officer in BFA 115, Strike Fighter Squadron 115, out in Lemoore, California. For 3 years, it's a pretty standard JO tour, as we say. I was single, I was young, I was all in on the job, very similar to now. I spent a lot of time working really hard at that squadron. And as you do that, you start to feel part of the fabric of the squadron. You are so involved in it. Everybody trusts you. You're part of the organization and you really feel part of it. And as you start to get closer to leaving, a little bit of you says like, man, when I leave, this place is going to fall apart. I do so much around here. The harsh reality is that's not at all true. As I got close to leaving 115 and started to turn over my jobs to other people, the squadron didn't miss a beat. It kept going just fine without me there. Hurt the ego a little bit, but I got over it and I started to learn that that's how it's supposed to be. You should be able to divest yourself from the organization you're in, and they should not miss a beat. If you become the linchpin and the place falls apart when you leave, you've probably done something wrong.
Wow, that's strong. And it's real when you do it. I love the video during command change. You're celebrating and there's a little gathering together. But while you're doing that, somebody's over scraping your name off the door and putting another name on.
Yeah.
You walk back in, it's not your office anymore.
Yeah.
So you stay in the moment.
I do.
Yeah.
That's the only way to do it. I think if you spend too much time thinking about dwelling on leaving, you're going to miss opportunities to take advantage of the fact you're here right now.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome. So you made mention of a movie that's out that I went and saw at an IMAX theater, which was pretty spectacular to see. You all allowed a Prime Video crew to spend a year with the Blue Angels. And there's this one really poignant moment, and maybe it meant more to me because I know you, but you'd just been named boss, number one pilot. You're the leader of the Blue Angels. And you get into the simulator that spins you around and mimics the G forces that you're going to feel in the air. And well, tell our listeners what happened.
Absolutely. So in the Blue Angels, we fly F-18s without G suits.
Is there anyone else that flies at your speed without a G suit?
No, we're the only ones that do it. So G suits are basically worn from the waist down by fleet pilots, and they have little air bladders in them that'll expand and essentially squeeze on your lower extremities to help you fight G. The inflating and deflating of those air bladders could actually move your arm based on how we sit in the airplane and cause an undesirable commanded movement of the stick, which we can't allow to happen when we fly as close as we do. So for that reason, we go to centrifuge training to learn how to manage G without the assistance of the G suit. Flying in the demo, flying in any F-18, but certainly flying in Blue Angels F-18, it's very physically demanding. And that is something that centrifuge training we do in San Antonio, Texas. It's not a perfect simulation of the airplane, but it certainly gets the job done. And it's a great training opportunity and a great asset to have that allows us to kind of be in a low risk environment where we can learn how to handle those anti-G techniques in a setting where we're not actually flying an airplane.
And you?
No, I didn't know. I lost consciousness on one of the rides early on. Yeah. Got out, looked at some things, made some adjustments to my strain, and finished it up that day.
And never again?
No, not at all.
Wow. So you've got this prime job, and there's this video out there of you in this very vulnerable moment. How did that feel to see it?
Obviously, it's not my most enjoyable professional moment. To put it in context, the filming is happening, and I have literally just been named to the team. We actually, when we go to the centrifuge, we have not even checked into the Blue Angels yet. So it really hadn't crossed my mind. I can assure you, when you're in a centrifuge at 7.5 Gs, the last thing you care about is the fact there's a camera in there with you. I really wasn't giving it a whole lot of thought until well after the fact. But the film has been very popular and people have enjoyed it. The flying footage is incredible.
Crazy good.
The training itself, I think, was valuable. I certainly can't say it didn't happen, other than maybe some, I don't even want to say professional embarrassment. Even that's a little too far. That's just part of training like that, and really any kind of training. The likelihood of failure is pretty high. We design training evolutions like this to allow you to fail so you can learn from it and improve. And that's what I did. I went down there. I didn't do a great job. It didn't really work out. Figured out what I could do better and improve from there. That's really all we can do when we're in a situation like that.
Well, I have to tell you, my family talked about it when we left. My daughter was like, wow, that was really amazing. Something that she learned about you by watching that, not just learning about the difficulty, but about your willingness to let the world in on this idea that we may look like supermen or superwomen when you put that suit on, but there's real human inside.
Yeah. And that is something that can be very hard to convey through an IMAX film, or really any film, is just what kind of strain is put on your body to fly these airplanes.
Well, you had me all tensed up. I was feeling it for you. You know, you and I spent the afternoon one day talking for a piece in Chief Executive Magazine. And I want to ask you about a line you said: respect must be earned, but not necessarily with you in the room to hear it.
Yeah.
One thing that I learned from you and from being around the team is that you assume everyone that shows up is a really good pilot. I mean, you got to be, even to be nominated. So you're not working to teach somebody how to fly. Among the most important things you look for in the interview process is this somebody I want to spend 200 days a year with? How do you do that?
So earning respect, earning trust, all these things take time. But when you have a very qualified, talented, capable individual that arrives in an organization, there has to be an understanding that they don't necessarily start at zero. When a corporation hires a CEO, they don't bring them in and put them at the lowest level right away. They hire them to do a job based on their previous experience and their previous performance,
Right.
and the expectation that they know what they're doing. And when they come into an organization, the people that now work for this new person, to a degree, they are owed a certain amount of respect, not because of their individual interactions one-on-one. Those haven't happened yet,
Right.
but based on what they have done up to that point. When you see folks that have achieved a high rank or have been in the military for a long time, they aren't all the same. They're all different. You're going to have different interactions with them. But at the very minimum, you've got to understand that they're there for a reason, and they've done some pretty incredible things to get where they are. And as far as I know, one of the only demo teams that doesn't do any tests for your flying aptitude.
Right. I understand. The first time you're actually asking them to fly is when you get to El Centro.
Yes, because they've already been tested. They're already qualified Navy and Marine Corps aviators, and we trust the Navy and Marine Corps process to get them to where they need to be. So just by virtue of the fact they've done that, we know they can fly the airplane. Now it's figuring out who is the best fit for the team. And that changes. The fit for one team may not be the best fit for another team. So part of our application process involves bringing applicants out to air shows and spend time with the team. And it goes well beyond traditional interview settings. Going out to a restaurant or having them at our briefs and our debriefs and just interacting with them on a personal level and just chatting. I think most people have a pretty good sense for personalities, and they can pick up very quickly on things if they spend the time to talk to people. We try to put as much time in as we can afford to have these interpersonal relationships with these folks and talk to them and learn as much as we can about them, allow them the opportunity to learn as much as they can about us. It sounds simple, but it does require a concerted effort, and it takes time.
Right.
That fit is driven just as much by the individuals applying as it is by the individuals currently on the team that are going to bring those folks on board. And when the stakes are as high as they can be when we're flying one of these flight demonstrations, it's pretty important that we have the right folks in the airplane. So every single person we bring to this team has established themselves as a standout and a high achiever in their fleet unit, wherever they came from. They're not coming in here and starting over. They're coming in here with that foundation already established. And now we're going to take them to the next level as Blue Angels.
You know, one of the challenges with a lot of companies is that hiring is sometimes done through an HR department. They're not actually having to go fly with these people.
Yeah. There's enough different types of jobs in most large companies. You can probably have a different approach to hiring for all of them. But if you're talking about somebody that the rest of the company is going to rely on and needs to trust, I think there'd be some value in maybe spending a little time with them before you offer them a job.
You know, you've used the word teams several times. In the corporate world, one of the words I think that is overused more than any is that word team. We say, this is my team. And the truth is, we're just a bunch of disconnected individuals who happen to draw the same paycheck.
Yeah.
You get it, both sporting and building your team at the Blue Angels. If you were coaching me on how to take those 7 other pilots and the 160 total, just getting to know each other and build a team from a bunch of disparate folks, what are some of the elements in team building that you would coach me to be thoughtful about?
A technique I have used that has always been very important to me is the language I use in discussing these kinds of things with people. And I think it matters. I will never refer to this as my squadron. I will never refer to it as my team. This is our squadron. This is our team. Those are our airplanes outside. These are our people that work together. People can pick up on those little nuanced words that you use that might indicate that you kind of view yourself as the ringleader as opposed to just part of the team. At the end of the day, I'm just part of this team. The job I have within the team is a job within the team, but it doesn't make me any better or any worse than anybody else, or more important or less important than anybody else. I mean, it'd be great if everybody took the same philosophy as I did, used the same words I do. However, I'm in the very lucky position that in my role in this command, as long as I'm saying what I consider to be the right things, the rest kind of falls into place. But leadership is very personal. Trust building is very personal, and it is personality dependent. I think everybody has a different way to interact with people. And if you try to take a leadership style from somebody else and just make it your own, that may or may not work. And it depends on the type of person you are. Leadership is personal. Leadership is personal. Team building is personal. There's a leadership style out there for every single person, but it is important to be genuine. Just seeing one you like is a great way to learn. But if you just try to mimic it exactly, it's probably going to fall short and seem a little disingenuous.
Is there someone that has been a leadership mentor to you? Someone that you've looked to and said, man, I can't mimic that, but boy, there's an awful lot there that I'd love to make sure that I study and can reflect.
There have been several. Probably the one that comes to mind first is a gentleman by the name of Gavin Duff, who's actually a new admiral. He's a one-star admiral now in the Navy.
Wow.
He was in my first several commands in a leadership role above me. So I have had the good fortune to be in several commands with him, watch how he does things and the way he leads. And I will freely admit that I have shamelessly stolen a number of things from him that I thought were incredible, and I've just made them my own.
Did they work as well for you?
I don't know if they worked as well, but I think they worked because I've continued to do them. And I would like to think if he were listening to this, he would agree that he's okay that I stole them and he doesn't want any credit for it because that's just the kind of guy he is.
That's what good leaders are. Like, you're willing to let somebody steal it from you too. You know, your father worked as a courier for FedEx for 27 years.
He did.
And he had a reputation for this exceptional work ethic. And I know that's really important to you. How did observing his dedication to his work shape your own approach to leadership and effort in your career?
My father was a blue collar guy. He worked hard and he knew how to work hard. And he had what seemed to me to be endless energy. What really impressed me about that, it was not watching him work as much as it was watching people react to him working. First thing people would bring up, no matter where you are, no matter who you're working for, no matter what your job is, people are paying attention and people around you are going to notice if you're fully into a job and you're doing it to the best of your ability, or you're maybe not trying that hard. My dad was not a guy to not try to do something. So if he was going to do it, he was going to do it. And people knew that. And people, I think, respected him for it and would talk about it, which certainly struck a chord with me. Actually, when I was a really little kid, my dad would take me to the Syracuse airport. At the time in Syracuse, there was actually an F-16 unit. So I'd see them fly a little bit. I want to say maybe the 4th of July and possibly Memorial Day as well. They would actually fly around all the little local small towns and do little flyovers for everybody. So I just thought that was the coolest thing in the world. And I don't really have that one moment where the light bulb came on and they said, this is what I want to do. I knew early on that I was enamored with airplanes. I figured out a little later that I think I wanted to fly them. I figured out even later I wanted to be in the military. And later than that, I figured out that the Navy was kind of the right spot for me. That all took time, but that's really where it started, was going to see those Federal Express cargo planes just sitting on the ramp at Syracuse and get loaded up.
Your dad would be so proud.
I hope so. I think it's a memory I cherish for sure. And I still remember being out there with him. It was pretty cool.
That's awesome. You know, the premise of this podcast is the idea that there are some great lessons that athletics can teach us. You played lacrosse, basketball, soccer. We got all kinds of great pictures of you from yearbooks. It's good stuff. Can you share a moment from a practice or a game that you still think about today? A moment where something happened that helped shape you and your thoughts about teamwork or your thoughts about leadership?
Yes. 7th or 8th grade, maybe even younger than that. But I was in a basketball practice, on a weekday night at 6 p.m. and it's upstate New York. So basketball season, it gets dark at like 4. It's nighttime out. We're in practice doing our thing. And I just remember the practice wasn't going well for me. I was making my share of mistakes, and coach at the time, a gentleman by the name of Pat Smart, was kind of getting on to me a little bit. Eventually I was just pouting, for lack of a better way to put it. I was just being kind of grouchy. And finally, coach, he had had enough. He sat me in the corner and used some pretty loud words. They weren't uncouth. He wasn't swearing at me, but he was yelling for sure. Basically told me to go sit down and he didn't need me on the court. That hurt my feelings, of course, because that's what you do when you're a young kid. You shrug and you're like, he's wrong. I'm not wrong. Practice wrapped up. Things kind of simmered down. And at the very end of practice, right before I left, he basically said, you're going to have bad days. That's life, but you got to take it in stride. You got to do better. That stuck with me. I don't know why. I don't know what it was about the way he said it or how he delivered it, or I don't know what it was, but that stuck with me forever, that you're going to have bad days and you have to figure out a way to get through it, because you can't just sit around wallowing in self-pity, being sad that things aren't going well. It's just not a way to live life.
Did you ever get a chance to share with Coach Smart that sticks?
I did years ago. I sent him a little something. Hopefully it resonated with him. I don't know. We've lost touch over the years. Part of that's because I switched high schools, but I did years and years ago. I sent him a little something just to let him know, thanks. It made a difference and I appreciated it. In general, I think school teachers maybe don't get that feedback as often as they deserve for the impression they can make on school students.
Right.
I hoped in my own little way, I gave a little pick me up that day.
Well, we love that. In fact, it's one of the things we often do. If somebody mentions someone who had influence on them, we'll try to reach out and make sure that they know they were mentioned in a podcast, because we think it's kind of cool for them to hear their name called out.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Well, Commander Alex Armatas, I have to tell you, love to thank you for your willingness to have educated me several times on high performance leadership. on building cultures of trust. There's so many amazing lessons to be learned, and I'm grateful to you for being a corporate competitor with us.
Well, I appreciate you giving me the time, and it's been great chatting with you, Don. Thanks.
Okay, if you have been to a Blue Angels show, if you've just watched the movie, and if you haven't, you should, you will appreciate this conversation as much as I did. We're going to debrief the conversation. First was around the importance of familiarity with trust. Familiarity builds trust. There's no shortcut. You have to develop that level of familiarity. You have to invest the time. You have to make the effort to give yourself the opportunity to get to know each other well enough that trust becomes a worthy byproduct. Sometimes we want to think that this happens naturally, that this is work. When they're going to fly at those kinds of speeds, at that kind of distance away from each other, they require that kind of trust. In his discussion about debriefs, I loved the importance of giving feedback to others without it becoming personal. Everyone in the room has to understand that your critique is for the good of the organization. It needs to be constructive, but tactful. If you lose tact, people stop listening. Doesn't matter if you're right, if nobody's listening. Third, when he said we're unwilling to accept that any detail is too small, man, reach your hand above your head and you could touch the wing of the plane above you. Yeah, you're right. No detail is too small if we're going to be traveling at that speed and at that distance from each other. And then I thought it was really impactful that he said that the training that they do is designed to allow you to fail. You know, we think of training as only to make you successful. Sometimes training needs to be designed to teach you to fail so that you can improve. He shared that very poignant moment from the movie where he passed out during training. Obviously, not something that a leader like him with his credentials would probably consider a career-defining highlight. But at the same time, he got better as a result. Training should allow us to fail so that we can improve. I improved today because I had Alex Armatas in my life, and I hope you feel that you did the same. I appreciate you. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a rating and review on Apple and Spotify. Feedback helps us spread the insights of our guests to a wider audience. It actually increases our ratings. Thank you so much for those who have done so in the past. And catch new episodes every Wednesday. Subscribe at corporatecompetitorpodcast.com to be the first to get a chance to listen. And as a thank you gift, I will send you a chapter from one of my best-selling books. Stay connected with me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. My handle is @DonYaeger, DonYaeger. And until next week, I appreciate you.